You're listening to the Long Game Podcast. I'm your host, Sandra Sciano. So many podcast guests that you hear out there are promoting books and courses or high-end programs. And of course, because podcasts are an awesome medium for promotion as well as visibility for entrepreneurs. My guest today, Scout Sobel, is taking the media industry by storm, utilizing her signature podcast tours as a powerful form of PR, placing her entrepreneur clients as guests on podcasts. We're all familiar with the concept of a book tour. Well, podcast tours are similar in approach, and they really get you out there on podcasts. Scout founded Scout's agency in early 2019, and over the past 3.5 years has booked over 2,000 podcast episodes, cultivated a database of over 5,000 podcasts, and has run over 150 podcast tours for her clients. Scout has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Brit & Co., amongst others, and she is the author of the best-selling book, The Emotional Entrepreneur, The Emotional Guidebook to Entrepreneurship, the host of the Emotional Entrepreneur podcast, and the co-host of the top charting podcast, Okay Sis. Scout is here sharing not only the benefits of being on a podcast, but how you can take these same strategies that she and her team use in her agency and start applying them to your own business right now. Writing your podcast pitch, it's one of the most important parts of the process. And Scout shares in juicy detail what you need to do here in this email. And it is spot on. And I love that she did not hold back. We also talk in depth about what to do when you have multiple genres to talk about on podcasts. And Scout gives an intimate, personal example that is insight into how she understands this medium of podcasting so well. And of course, we dig into Scout's own course that is launching, the Podcast Tour Academy. Pay attention here, because how she is setting up her course business is an amazing example of how to spread your wings, support a movement, and leave the comparison of competition behind. Her brand extension ideas will get your gears turning about ways to use the assets you've created for your own business. This is serious gold to thinking bigger. The long game is podcast tours with Scout Sobel. In a world where everyone is doing, it's easy to get lost in a sea of comparison, secret tricks, and promises of overnight success. The long game? That's my approach to business. You gotta show up, you gotta do the work, and there are no quick fixes for long-term success. It takes creativity, it takes strategy, and it takes listening to the voice inside you. I'm a web designer, digital strategist, and energetic thinker, bringing you real-world business building experiences, conversations with creators who are out there doing it now, and ideas to spark the energy in your own business. And along the way, we're gonna have a little bit of fun as well. So thanks for being here, and let's get to today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Long Game Podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation. My guest is Scout Sobel, who is a trailblazer in the media industry for utilizing podcast tours. You know, we love talking about podcasting here. And it's another form of PR. She founded Scout's agency in February of 2019 and has really taken into her signature podcast tours to place female entrepreneurs as guests on podcasts. Scout has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Brit & Co., amongst others. And over the past 3.5 years, her agency has grown 600% since year one, booked over 2,000 podcast episodes, and cultivated a database of over 5,000 podcasts. And she has run 150 podcast tours. She is also the author of the best-selling book, Emotional Entrepreneur, The Emotional Guidebook to Entrepreneurship, and the host of the Emotional Entrepreneur podcast and co-host of the top charting podcast, Okay Sis. Well, I am so excited to have you here today, Scout. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always like, I was getting a little exhausted hearing that. I was like,
girl, you bring it. How can, it goes with you everywhere you go now. And, it's a good testament to what you do and what you're here to talk about today. So, I know that you are an expert at getting your clients as guests on podcasts. And you're here today to share some tips and what we can implement for ourselves. So let's hop right in. Let's just start with some of that ROI. What are the best reasons to be on a podcast? We know some of them, it gets you more visible. But let's go into some of the specifics.
Well, the ROI of being a guest on a podcast is one of my favorite things to talk about because the ROI has such a depth, which I believe really mirrors the medium. The medium of podcasting is deep. So naturally the results are going to be deep. And I have seen everything from our clients' book going to #1 bestsellers on Amazon. I've seen clients gaining thousands of Instagram followers. I've seen their podcast downloads double. I've seen them sign high retainer clients. I've seen them add to their network in really empowering ways. So some of their top role models, some celebrity entrepreneurs, all of a sudden are in our clients' network now, and they're doing events together and they're doing work together. I've seen our clients' books get endorsed by really main public figures.
That's so awesome.
I've seen revenue grow month after month. I've seen personal brands become legitimate thought leaders in their space. And so when I talk about the ROI of a podcast tour, it lights me up so much versus like the ROI of traditional PR because it is so human and there really is no other strategy out there where someone gets to spend up to an hour listening to you talk about why you do what you do. So people resonate with that human first, and then they go and support your business. So it's been pretty phenomenal to watch our clients' personal brands flourish. And then as a result, have their business grow.
I love how you say that podcast will transform you from a plateaued business owner to a visible visionary, because we all kind of get to that point sometimes where we're like, I'm trucking along. I'm just staying the same. And really podcasts, they do produce rather quickly compared to some of the traditional media and all of that. So it really can give you that visibility boost. So I think all of those pieces that you named, it can really come in and help different parts of your business.
Well, also my favorite part about this is that so many business owners today are either solopreneurs or thought leaders or coaches or have a digital presence. And they might not be a candidate for traditional PR. Their business might not jive with the traditional PR model, or it might take months and months and months and months to even get a feature. And you might not see those results from those features. And so what I love about the podcast game and the podcast strategy as a PR strategy is that literally anyone can jump in at any moment. There are 2 million podcasts, which means that there is a group of podcasts that do want to interview you. And so it's almost like this long game thing to think about. However, I love it so much because the person who started their business 6 months ago can start and get in front of new audiences. The person who is 10 years in can jump in and get in front of new audiences. And that's one of my favorite parts of the strategy.
And I also love how you say you don't have to be launching or promoting something to be a guest on a podcast. Like, this is a strategy that you can use anytime. You know, we think about that like, you know, a podcast tour is in support of something, but it really can just be about getting you out there.
Oh yeah. I'm on a perpetual podcast tour. It's how I built my career. My entire career is thanks to podcasting and going on podcasts. So clients always come to us and they say, well, I'm not really launching anything. Should I be on a podcast? And I say the best way is to dedicate like the next 2 to 3 years of your life to going on podcasts, whether you're launching or not, because podcasts are evergreen. So for example, I was on a podcast last July. So I don't know, 8 months ago, let's just say. And I just brought in a client from that. And from that one podcast episode, I made $22,000, except it took 8 months to see that return. So podcasting is like kind of always working in the background because people are finding new episodes from a year or two ago. So I would not wait for a launch. I think I should say from firsthand experience, the women that I represent that are on more of a brand awareness podcast tour and then rev up during the launch and then go back to a brand awareness podcast tour are the ones who see the biggest transformation in their careers.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because you think about it, it's just like any other form of media. You've got to keep doing it all the time as well. You know, when we think about advertising or something, it isn't just coming in for this big jolt, even though you can get that. Like, you can also really get a lot of benefits by working a runway year round. And I think what's interesting about podcasting as a medium is that people do discover a show and then binge it. So to your point of someone discovered me from this episode in July, if people are out promoting their podcast and getting new listeners all the time, people dive back into those episodes as well. And so there's always this chance for new audiences to be finding you along the way.
Oh, 100%. I love that you said that. And there's also another way to even add on to that thought, which is that if you go on a small podcast today, that podcast might be huge in 3 years and someone could go back and listen and all of a sudden a podcast from 3 years ago blows up and they want to work with you. They're buying your book, all this stuff. So it really is, you go on a podcast today, but the benefits can continue to bear fruit years and years later.
And you've mentioned a few times now how it is a little different than traditional PR. You've kind of noted that, but let's talk about how that happens in terms of the pitching. Like we know that we've got to put ourselves out there. And one of the questions people always ask is like, what do I write? What do I say? Those type of things in the pitch. So can you talk to us a little bit about how to pitch yourself as a guest now?
Yes. So pitching yourself as a guest to podcast is kind of our magic sauce here at Scouts Agency. I credit our pitches to the way I built this business and the success that we've seen for our clients, because when I got into this industry, I did not have any connections, right? This was all built on cold emailing and cold pitching. So I have mastered what it takes. So over the last 4 years, I don't even want to know how many pitches we've sent out or how many pitches we've written with all the women that we've represented, but we've come up with this proprietary template. So we teach this whole thing in our Podcast Tour Academy, but I'm going to leave your audience with this that's really tangible that they can implement today, right now. Podcast pitches get to be human because podcast interviews are human. So yes, you want to identify that shiny part of yourself, right? Like write down the 5 shiny parts. And when I say shiny, I want you to brag. I want you to write down 5 business brags. What are you so proud of? And if this makes you uncomfortable, push through it, because this is where your value lies. And this is the value that gets to get communicated to new audiences. So I want you to write down your 5 business brags that you are really proud of and make sure that those stand out throughout your pitch, because those are the things that are going to create trust, credibility, and catch a podcast host's attention. And then when you're crafting your pitch, I want you to get really, really micro with what you can offer the podcast host. So this is what I always tell my clients. Instead of saying, I can talk about parenthood, because maybe you're a mommy blogger, let's say, instead of saying, I can talk about parenthood, you're going to say, I can come on your podcast and talk about how to consciously parent a 2-year-old. I want you to get so micro. So think about those 5 top business brags, come up with micro talking points, and don't be afraid to infuse your personality and a little bit more of that humanness. This isn't like a dry journalistic cut and paste fact only type of pitch, right? This is, here's my human, here's what I've accomplished, and here's what I can give value and how I can support your audience in a very, very specific way. Now, we have a whole template that we really follow for every single one of our pitches, but at the core, those energies and those specifics are always included.
I love that you said that too, because it really is about getting human and connecting with other people. Like I am a person who gets a lot of these pitches, and, I look for what pops out at me, certain words, certain phrases, or a certain way that they're speaking about themselves and highlighting a feature on themselves. So I really think that is amazing advice and different than, you hear all the time. Of course, you've got to listen to the show, right? You have to know where you're pitching, but, that is really going to put people on a good path. All right. So when we're talking, tell us a little bit about the idea of a podcast tour. I mean, we are familiar with book tours and we understand that concept of going out and promoting your book. And a podcast tour, I know you say it's similar, but if it's not even wrapped around a launch or a promotion, where as a book is. So can you tell us more about the concept of podcast tours?
Yeah. So at the basic, a podcast tour is when you go on a plethora of podcasts, and that could be a concentrated tour for a book launch. Like let's say for 6 months, you're going hard, or it could be an evergreen brand awareness, perpetual podcast tour. Like myself, I'm on 1 to 2 podcasts a week at this point in my career. And with that, you are getting in front of new audiences, being interviewed and talking about why you do what you do and providing value to an audience. And the reason that oftentimes I'll compare it to a book tour is because very similar to a book tour, instead of going to 15 different cities, you're going on 15 different podcasts. So that's really the basics of what it is. And I always say it sounds incredibly simple, right? But there's a lot of logistics that go into the back end of something like that. But it's essentially like a media tour, except you are going on podcasts versus getting interviewed through other outlets, IG Live, websites, etc.
And you had mentioned that your podcast tour academy is launching, which I'm very excited for you because, and I want to ask you a little bit about that in a minute, but in there too, are you giving the tools, like how to set these things up? I come from a podcast background. I mean, a PR background. So I did PR for 20 years before I became an entrepreneur. And so like there's certain methods. I'm like, all right, that's what I would do to track, or all of those pieces. Are those things that you're also teaching inside the Podcast Tour Academy?
So we're giving it all away in the Podcast Tour Academy, and I'll tell you why. One of my missions and one of the agency's missions is to support other female entrepreneurs. And I get on the phone with women all the time. And this is a service that they want because they feel as if it could benefit their career. I've seen it benefit so many women's careers. And it's something that they want to either be a best-selling author, or they want to be a speaker one day, or they want to gain more clients, or they want to build their audience, and social media is burning them out and the reels are exhausting and all of this stuff, but they want to reach people in an authentic way that's actually going to move the bottom line, right? And, we are an agency and we are a boutique agency, and I believe we're the best at what we do. And so our retainers are high for a lot of entrepreneurs. And so after speaking to so many who wanted to sign but couldn't fit the marketing or the PR budget into our retainers, I decided there's a way to support women in hopping into this strategy because I believe so significantly in this strategy. So I'm walking, if you're a man, you can sign up too. We just kind of specialize in talking to women. We are launching a 6-week course. And in that 6-week course, you will learn our proprietary pitch template. You will learn how to pitch yourself. You will learn through our algorithm how to assess if a podcast is the right opportunity for you, because
that's so important.
Yeah, because there's 2 million. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, I want to be in Forbes and Well and Good and Refinery. Like there's not that many to know in the traditional PR world, but it's difficult to hop into a list of 2 million podcasts and be like, not only where am I going to start, but what types of podcasts should I be pitching first that's actually going to yield yeses, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to go through that. And then we're going to go through a lot of the logistics. So what do you need to be prepared? What do you need to get the host? What does the host need to get you? How to maximize the interview once it's done? How to craft your talking points? We're taking you from conception all the way to the end of the interview, and then how to maximize it after. And over the last 4 years, this is what we've focused on. So we've developed a tried and true, we could package it all up and hand it over to you. And that's exactly what we're doing, because I believe there's so many entrepreneurs that are struggling to get in front of new audiences or communicate their message in a way that's authentic. And maybe video content isn't working for you, and the podcast is the platform. We see it work time and time again for coaches and authors very specifically. So we're launching it. I'm teaching it along with my team. You have access to the agency team on Slack. And yeah, we're not really holding anything back.
Yeah. And I love that whole idea too, that you can get tired of the reels and the video and all of that. Like we're all kind of subject to that. We talk a lot about this here because, we are talking about different strategies, and you've got to be joyful about what you're doing, right? Yeah. And if you're getting burnt out by a platform or a strategy, you've got to try some other things. And I feel like, we're all really conversationalists, or when it comes to talking about the work that we do, so this is such a good segue into promoting yourself as being on podcasts. And I think just people haven't done it, or they don't, know the first steps to take to get into it. And so this is such a good resource for them to be able to say, all right, because I could just get on there and talk. I mean, I have clients myself who I say to them, I'm like, you just need to talk. Like you are so good if you get somebody in a conversation, right? Like that's all you need to do on a video, but it's a stopping point there, right? So getting in a conversation or doing a presentation is such a different feeling for them.
Yeah. And I think that, let's talk about our purchasing habits too, real quick. I mean, how many books are sitting in our Amazon cart that we just purchased because we heard the author on a podcast? How many products do we hear on a podcast? How many of our role models and the people that we look up to in the space are on podcasts all the time? It's just this new way where we get to discover new people, not necessarily like new products or new advertisements, but new people that change our lives, that change our businesses, that change our spirituality, that change our self-help. Mm-hmm. So when people think to themselves like, oh, I want to be that thought leader, and they're looking up to other thought leaders, those thought leaders are on podcasts because the way we talk is the best way for, not for all of us, but for many of us, is such a beautiful way to accurately and fully drop into why we do what we do and spread that message.
Yeah. And I think also podcasts are such an accessible medium, I listen to podcasts. I've been listening for years, but I walk my dog for almost an hour every day. Like that's my time. I listen to so much. I was awake at 2:30 last night. I'm like, put a podcast in. And, I've got my bedtime ones. I've got my dog walk ones. Like I am really able to dig into this. People who have commutes are able to listen to their choice of the medium. So, I just think the content there is so interesting that, and there's a vast array to choose from and ways to listen to it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel as if it's I always say it's like the best time to be a business owner or start anything because literally there's like a free education on the podcast app for all of us. Like want to go from 6-figure to 7 figures? There's a podcast episode for that. Want to learn how to cultivate the best morning routine? There's a podcast episode that. Want to learn how to spice up your relationship? There's podcast episodes for that. And so that's where people are turning to better their lives and find information on how to excel in different areas of their careers. And there's a place and an audience for every step of where everyone is at, if that makes sense. So when I talk to women, it's crazy. They ask me, would I be a good podcast guest? Like, do I have anything to say? And I'm like, girl, you built like a multi-6-figure business off of whatever, or you just quit your day job and you're taking a chance. Like that's something to talk about. Maybe the business isn't up and running fully. There's places in our stories that have a space, and the podcast app gives us that opportunity to tell so many of our stories and reach those audiences that need to hear that exact transformation and value offer that we have going for ourselves today.
And it goes back to that whole human approach, right? It's your human approach by sharing your stories, not just on the pitching end, but on the connection end with the audience that's listening as well.
Yeah. And beyond that, I just want to point out one more thing is that I have 5,000 Instagram followers and my book went to number 11 on the top charts for women in business in Amazon. That's because of a podcast tour. That's not because of social media. And it's just, it's such a it's almost like freedom. We're like, finally, there's another way to do this.
Yeah. And I think it's also, which something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but podcast is really great practice for other speaking engagements. It gives you this platform to work things out and it's one-to-one. I mean, I feel like I'm having this one-to-one conversation with you, even though I know people are listening. So the pressure's off in terms of that. You're able to polish your material and present yourself if you want to go do other speaking or presentation or teaching opportunities.
Oh my gosh, ding, ding, ding. You are so a podcaster because this is exactly like I just started getting invited to speaking engagements and I feel so confident because I've literally recorded over 500 podcast episodes. I say it's the best place to massage your message because you can be on a podcast and you think, oh, okay, topic number 1 is the best thing. But all of a sudden you go off on this other topic and you're like, whoa, there's something there in my business and in my messaging. And then you fine tune and you fine tune and you fine tune and you get comfortable behind a microphone, which I believe is step 1 to being comfortable on a stage.
Totally. And you really, like you were saying, you massage your message. Like, you know what your message is, you know what you want to say. And that really helps when you are in sales calls, in just connecting with people in your, I don't even call it the elevator pitch, but your one-liner type of thing. Like, I know what to say, right? Because I'm saying it all the time when I'm talking to people. So I think it just gives you this platform to get out there and get comfortable.
Yeah. Amen. Because the first podcast you go on, you're going to be nervous. That's for sure. So it's like the best muscle that you get to utilize all the time that will benefit you, even in, as you said, your sales or your marketing efforts or your emails, all that stuff.
And, I want to ask you one question because I encounter this sometimes of different clients who they have multiple messages, so to speak. So that is something like you can pinpoint the podcast that you want to go on, but like, how are you helping people in the Podcast Tour Academy when there's multiple messages as well?
Such a good question. No one's ever asked me that. And I absolutely love that you're highlighting this because I'm the best case study for that. So I obviously run this business and I do podcast tours, but I also suffer from bipolar disorder and have a whole mental health journey that I talk about. And so I really have delineated two different messages, two different demographics, two different audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I either go on podcasts to talk about mental health, or I go on podcasts to talk about the power of podcasting. And so with that, I'm able to craft two messages, and I find where they intersect. So we have so based off my own experience, as well as we also have clients that are similar. We've had a client who wants to talk about human design and wants to talk about affiliate marketing, right? So how do we communicate those two? Can we mesh them? Do we have 3 separate pitches? Do we have 2 separate pitches?
Right.
Do we have different audiences? And so that is 100% everything we're going to get into. We're going to talk about your messaging, which podcast you need to go after, and what.
So you're guiding people in there on that type of.
Oh yeah, totally. Because that's, again, we're human, we're multifaceted. We don't just talk about one thing. And the podcast app has room for those different facets of our lives and what we bring to the table.
Yeah, because I find that's really when I'm working with clients, they may have their main piece, but there is always another talk that fits in. And it's like, how do you manage that? And how do they really go out confidently and pitch themselves that way without fire hosing someone and putting it all in? It's really about finessing what you're saying and finessing your approach to people.
Oh yeah. That pitch is like the end all be all when it comes to it. And it's people, I remember in the beginning, they would say, oh, you must have like contacts for years. I was like, no, I started this 6 months ago, but here's my results. And people are like, how are those your results? I'm like, because when I email, I communicate in a human way. I know how to pull the things that resonate with another person. So that's everything we're going to go over in the Podcast Tour Academy too.
That's awesome. I always ask people, tell me one thing that you do inside there that you haven't mentioned yet. I do just want to mention to you though, and maybe it's what you want to mention. You call this a certification program. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how does that fit in to what they're learning?
Yes. So the certification program about it is really if there's anybody in the program that is not just an entrepreneur, maybe they are an assistant or they're a virtual assistant or they're a freelance PR agent, they could come and take this Podcast Tour Academy and then go to their employer or multiple clients of theirs and say, I'm certified in running podcast tours. Because what we're seeing is that many PR agencies are jumping on this strategy, but they're not familiar with the podcast landscape. And as someone who's in the client-based service industry, you really need to be the expert when you're presenting a new revenue stream or a new service or a new opportunity to a client. And so we're also servicing privately in addition to the Podcast Tour Academy. If you are a PR agency, we can do a workshop with you privately to certify you guys. We can do trainings, et cetera, because we really want to set PR agencies up, PR freelancers, virtual assistants up to be certified in this service and in this strategy so that they aren't fumbling in front of clients, so that they are the expert in the room, and so that they're ultimately serving their clients the best they can.
And that's such a smart strategy for your business as well, hitting consumers, but also that agency piece. I mean, you identified a need in the market that other agencies need this, and to offer that certification piece, really smart. And I love the way that you're thinking about your business as a whole and your course piece as that viable product to help other people in the industry. Super smart.
Thank you. I mean, I really felt like it was time last year to extend our business past just one-on-one, because we really mastered that one-on-one service. Like, you come to us for a 6 or 9 month tour, like we have it handled. And now that we are truly experts and have crafted this beautiful service that is successful, we feel as if there's so many more people that we can serve. And so either if it's the 6-week course through the Podcast Tour Academy or a 2-day private training by us, we'll fly out to you for a PR agency to really get comfortable with this practice. And then hint, hint, our database that we're going to open up to the public to subscribe to soon. We want to help other agencies and entrepreneurs benefit from this strategy.
That's such a great brand extension. And really, because that resource is needed and you're fulfilling that need for these agencies as well. So they don't have to take the 3 years to build the database for themselves. And it also makes me think, like, good for you. Like, I'm putting it out there. I'm not competitive in terms of, like, there's enough room for all of us. You're an agency, they're an agency, but you're bringing it all in, and you figure out a way to do it that benefits your business in a non-competitive way in that way. It's really makes an impression, and it's very impactful.
Thank you. And the amount of people that are like, when I tell them, what we're doing, if people close to me, they're like, do you really want to give away your secrets to everybody? I mean, you're going to create competition.
Right? We all worry about that.
And I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. That's a fear that keeps me small. That's a fear that keeps my business small. And that's a fear that keeps other women's businesses small. And so I'm at a position where I've developed this and I want to help others benefit the same. There's no such thing as competition in my mind. The more we can serve, the more we can provide value, the more we can help rise other people up in business, I believe, the more we individually get compensated for that and the bigger our lives get.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's a viewpoint that we need to, first of all, it was just mic drop there because that's it, right? Everybody needs to come to their own business that way and extend. So listen, everybody, we are going to have all of Scout's links where you can find her, where you can follow her. She has a great Instagram as well. We'll have links to the podcast and of course to the Podcast Tour Academy, which is launching this March. So go check her out, go follow, and really go and learn about how to do this for yourself. Scout, I want to thank you so much for being here today. It was so enlightening and, good luck on the rest of your podcast tours.
Thank you so much. This was an honor.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me today. You can access more information, links mentioned in this episode, and the show notes at thelonggamepodcast.net. If today's show connected with you in some way, please share it with your friends or hop on and leave a review. Both of these make a really big difference. All right, until next time, keep playing the long game.